Today's story is about Helene Richter, a 26-year-old German secretary who expected torture and death in American captivity, but discovered something that shattered all Nazi propaganda. In August 1944, Helene Richter, a German civilian, shivered in the crowded hold of a US Navy transport ship in the Atlantic. Caught near a Luftwaffe supply depot in Normandy, her background, a Hamburg shipping family, private finishing school, fluent English, mattered little now. Clutching a worn photograph of her parents, she recalled Nazi propaganda's grim predictions for German prisoners in American hands: rape, torture, forced labor. The thrumming diesel engines and rolling seasickness intensified her dread, a stark contrast to her former life of secretarial work, opera, and coffee at the Ulster Pavilion, which had ended abruptly when American soldiers surrounded her cataloguing fuel shipments. Her capture on August 15, 1944, 3 kilometers outside Caen, had been swift and surprisingly devoid of violence. American voices shouted orders, hands were raised, but no shots were fired. The young GI who zip-tied her wrists seemed tired, not savage. This immediate lack of brutality, though, left Helene more frightened than relieved. Nazi newsreels depicted American soldiers as brutes. This professional efficiency felt like a deceptive prelude to worse horrors. 3 days into the Atlantic crossing, a US Army guard approached with a sandwich and lukewarm coffee, white bread, possibly spam. Helene recoiled, certain it was poisoned, a slow kill as Dr. Goebbels had warned. She watched other German women, a nurse, factory workers, or a telephone operator, hesitantly eat. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No one collapsed, no one screamed. Helene, stomach cramping from hunger, took a bite, bland, salty, edible, not poisoned. Her hands shook as she ate, every certainty about American brutality fracturing. Later, the guard offered clean water from a bucket. Helene drank, perplexed by such basic humanity on an enemy transport ship. That night, Greta, a nurse whose hospital was overrun, whispered about an American medic bandaging her sprained ankle, giving her aspirin, and calling her Ma'am. The propaganda had promised monsters. These Americans were methodical, impersonal, but not cruel. The cognitive dissonance gave Helene a headache worse than the seasickness. By September 1944, transport trucks rumbled Helene and other prisoners through the endless cornfields of Iowa. Utterly unlike Hamburg or Normandy, Helene anticipated barbed wire, guard towers, and attack dogs. Instead, they arrived at freshly painted wooden barracks in Fort Des Moines, arranged in neat rows under a snapping American flag. Women in US Army uniforms directed them professionally, without screaming or whips. Helene's confusion deepened into vertigo. Processing took 2 hours. A female officer unemotionally noted Helene Richter's details. Age 26, civilian, captured August 15th, Normandy, secretary, fluent English. An orderly then led Helene to a barracks with clean bunks, thin mattresses, folded blankets, a coal stove, and windows. It resembled an austere boarding school dormitory, not the concrete filth she'd expected. Greta collapsed onto a nearby bunk. Neither woman spoke, grappling with the disproved enemy narrative. That evening, an orderly summoned them to the mess hall. Outside, the September Iowa air smelled of earth and dried grass, a stark contrast to Hamburg's dampness or Normandy's burned fuel. Inside the long wooden structure, American guards casually slung rifles. At the serving line, older cooks in white aprons ladled out scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, real butter, and coffee onto metal trays. Helene stared at her plate. The pale yellow steaming eggs looked wrong, too perfect, too abundant compared to Germany's wartime powdered substitutes. They must be rotten or slow-acting poison. Around her, 60 German women prisoners eyed their food with similar suspicion. A freckled young American corporal, perhaps 20, saw Helene frozen with her tray. He approached, mimed eating his own eggs, smiled. Ewan said good in English with a Midwestern accent, giving a thumbs up. Helene, despite understanding his words, couldn't believe them. She watched the factory workers from the Ruhr, who, driven by hunger, ate first. No convulsions, no screaming. Helene's propaganda-trained mind searched for explanations, slow-acting poison, torture reserved for later. She took a small bite of egg. It tasted like egg, slightly oversalted, with a real texture. She ate more. The bacon was crispy, salty, fatty, a taste she hadn't had in 2 years. The coffee, though weak, was hot. By the meal's end, Helene felt a strange sensation, actual satiation, in a POW camp run by the enemy that was supposed to starve them. After dinner, a tall, efficient American nurse in her mid-30s arrived at their barracks, speaking slow. Clear English about medical examinations. Helene, startled by the courtesy, answered promptly, "No, ma'am, I'm well." The nurse smiled and moved on. Greta whispered later, "She asked about my ankle, remembered from processing. How does she remember?" Helene had no answer. This level of organization and individual attention contradicted all they'd been taught about American brutality. That first night, Helene lay on her clean mattress, trying to process the day's impossibilities. No torture, no rape, no beatings. Electric lights, functional and daily cleaned toilets, floors washed by orderlies, all in a prison camp for enemy civilians. The coal stove warmed the room against the September chill. Through the window, stars gleamed over the Iowa prairie. Hamburg was burning. Her parents enduring British bombing raids and starvation on ration cards. Yet here, in an American POW camp, she'd eaten eggs and bacon. Guilt mixed with relief, creating a nausea worse than the Atlantic crossing. 3 weeks later, in October, a routine emerged at Fort Des Moines. Morning roll call, breakfast, voluntary work assignments, lunch, free time, dinner, lights out. Helene volunteered for kitchen duty, seeking purpose. The American cooks, older men deemed unfit for combat, treated the German women with gruff politeness. Charlie, from Nebraska, taught Helene to use the industrial potato peeler. They communicated through single words and gestures. Her Hamburg organizational instincts earned his good work, miss. Miss, not Kraut, not prisoner, miss. The cognitive dissonance caused constant psychological strain. Helene saw American guards laughing, a camp doctor treating a German prisoner's infection with American soldier antibiotics, and a stern major enforcing regulations for prisoner clothing, bedding, and food. These were the monsters of Nazi propaganda. These methodical, often bored, occasionally kind Americans who complained about Iowa winters and showed family photos. In late October, a hospital orderly, Corporal Davis from Ohio, approached Helene. "Miss Richter?" she heard. She stood nervously. "The camp administrator needs help with German correspondence. You speak English? You were a secretary?" Helene nodded, dreading the implications. "Would you help translate letters, organize camp records? It's voluntary, no special privileges, but Captain Murphy says the work might make time pass easier." Helene's mind raced. Help the enemy? Yet, this work helped German prisoners communicate home, administrative work rather than military. Her Hamburg skills, typing, filing, translation, suddenly relevant. 3 months ago, she catalogued Luftwaffe fuel. Now Americans wanted her to process Red Cross correspondence for German POWs. The party would call it treason, but the party had lied about everything else. Why trust their definition of loyalty? She thought of her parents. If alive, they'd want to know she survived. Other German women had families wondering. The American Red Cross might get letters through, and assisting this system would help her fellow prisoners maintain hope. "Yes," Helene quietly replied. "I'll help." Corporal Davis nodded, noting it. "Report to the administration building tomorrow, 0800. Bring your English skills and your patience." Some of these letters are heartbreaking. His matter-of-fact tone held compassion for German prisoners, from an American soldier whose country fought hers. Propaganda promised hatred. This was professionalism underlain by shared humanity. How could she reconcile that? That night, Helene wrote her first censored letter home. Mutti, Fati, I'm alive. I'm in America, in Iowa. They feed us. They don't hurt us. I don't understand it, but I'm safe. Everything we were told about the Americans was lies. Everything. I pray you're alive to read this. I pray Hamburg still stands. I pray this madness ends soon. She omitted the poisoned eggs, the transport ship terror, the enemy's unexpected humanity. Some truths were too vast for censored letters. The next morning, October 28, 1944, Helene reported to Captain Murphy, a balding, efficient, exhausted man. He gestured to a desk piled with German letters and Red Cross forms. Miss Richter, this is chaos. I need organization. Help me create a system for these women to communicate. Some letters won't get through, but we try. Looking at her directly, he added, It's strange. You're a prisoner helping us administer a camp, but these are your people we're trying to help. Your skills matter here. Helene sat, picked up a letter from an Essen factory worker, and began typing the English translation, her secretarial training taking over. One letter, then another, then 10. The work was mechanical, heartbreaking, purposeful. By lunchtime, she'd processed 23 letters. Captain Murphy brought her weak American coffee and a sandwich. Good work, he said. You just helped 23 families maybe get news. That matters. Helene looked at the remaining pile, Captain Murphy's tired face, and out the window at Fort Des Moines, clean barracks, organized routines, American efficiency applied to enemy prisoners. The eggs weren't poisoned. The water wasn't contaminated. The Americans hadn't tortured her. Instead, they'd given her work that mattered, asked her to use her skills to help, and treated her like a human being with value. 6 months ago, this would have been unthinkable. Now it was Tuesday morning in Iowa. She picked up the next letter. The war wasn't over. Hamburg still burned. But here, in this strange corner of the conflict, humanity had crossed enemy lines in ways Nazi propaganda never predicted. And Helene Richter, prisoner of war, had chosen to be part of that unexpected grace. December 1944 to March 1945, Fort Des Moines. Iowa Helene Richter, a German prisoner of war, had rapidly transformed Major Thompson's administrative office at Fort Des Moines. Her color-coded filing system, praised by Colonel Harrison as creating the most efficient supply depot in the 7th Service Command, soon drew wider attention. By mid-December 1944, the Omaha Regional Quartermaster requested copies of Helene's cross-referencing system to implement across 14 Midwest POW facilities. The irony wasn't lost on Helene. She, a German POW, was now streamlining American military supply chains using methods her father had taught her. She'd once feared execution by these Americans, now they sought her expertise. The demand for her skills escalated in January 1945 when Captain Robert Mitchell of Camp Dodge's Quartermaster Corps arrived, laden with 18 months of disheveled requisition forms. He presented the chaotic records, urgent for an impending Inspector General's audit, to Helene, expressing his embarrassment at seeking help from a German POW. Helene, seeing requisitions mixed with delivery manifests and medical supplies confused with food stores, all lacking dates or cross-references, felt an organizing urge. She requested 3 days, 2 typist assistants, and access to all delivery logs since June 1943. Mitchell, surprised, confirmed her willingness. Helene, with a small smile, agreed. The abstract concept of enemy faded before the clear logic. Men needed supplies, and chaos obstructed access to them. Nationality became secondary to the shared problem. Helene plunged into 12-hour workdays. Corporals Sarah Bennett and Margaret O'Brien, her American typist assistants, initially maintained a professional distance. However, within 2 days, Witnessing Helene's systematic dissection of the bureaucratic mess, their reserve dissolved. Sarah, marveling at Helene's ability to correlate a September 1943 blanket requisition with a November delivery manifest without notes, asked how she retained such vast amounts of information. Helene explained, "My father shipped textiles from Hamburg to South America, processing 15,000 invoices annually. He taught me to see patterns, not just numbers. Each requisition tells a story: who ordered it, why, and when delivery was expected. The story reveals the missing pieces." Margaret eagerly requested to be taught. For the next 3 weeks, Helene trained them, emphasizing her father's principle: administrative systems should aid human logic, not hinder it. Color coding aligned with natural visual categorization, cross-referencing mirrored mental data connection, and alphabetical filing followed linguistic instinct. By late January, Sarah and Margaret processed requisitions at triple their former speed. Captain Mitchell's audit preparation, originally estimated at 4 months, was completed in just 26 days. Camp Dodge's administrative rating soared from deficient to exemplary. Mitchell, in Major Thompson's office, shook his head in disbelief. "A German secretary just saved my career." The impact of Helene's work soon reached beyond military efficiency. In February 1945, Des Moines city officials requested assistance from Fort Des Moines. The city's civilian rationing board was overwhelmed by paperwork. Ration stamps for 30,000 families, fluctuating federal rules, black market investigations, and exemption petitions. Colonel Harrison saw an opportunity. He asked Helene if she would help civilians, working twice weekly in town under guard escort to aid American families with food rationing. Helene felt a familiar surge of internal conflict. German families starved under Allied bombs, yet she was to help Americans manage their comparatively abundant food. However, she recalled ration board reports of elderly Americans skipping meals, hungry children, and families struggling with complex federal regulations. Hunger, she knew, transcended nationality. "I'll help," she said quietly. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, Helene and her escort, Corporal James Wilson, traveled to the Des Moines Civic Center. The rationing board, located in 3 cramped rooms, was staffed by 4 bewildered volunteers. Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, the board chairwoman, and a 62-year-old widow whose husband died at Pearl Harbor, received Helene with stiff formality. She explained the chaos of the exemption files. Helene, recognizing a system even more disorganized than the military requisitions, swiftly created a new one: medical exemptions by condition, agricultural by farm size and crop, and pregnancy allowances by due date for automatic review. She cross-referenced everything with federal updates, flagging actions necessary before deadlines. Within 2 weeks, exemption petition processing time plummeted from 6 weeks to 9 days. Mrs. Patterson, observing Helene, said quietly, "You're helping us feed our families. Your people and mine are killing each other in Europe, and you're helping us." Helene replied, "My mother always said hunger doesn't care about politics, Mrs. Patterson. Neither should solutions." A pivotal moment occurred in late February when Mrs. Helen Morrison, a young mother, arrived in tears. Her infant daughter had a severe milk allergy, requiring a specialized soy-based formula that needed additional ration stamps. The federal exemption process was incredibly complex, demanding 3 forms and physician certifications Mrs. Morrison couldn't afford. The usual processing time was 8 to 10 weeks, but her supply would last only 12 days. Helene, her heart aching, thought of her sister's children in Hamburg, likely starving. She considered the suffering of mothers everywhere. During her lunch break, Helene drafted a simplified formula exemption form, 1 page instead of 3, requiring a single physician signature and compliant with federal regulations. She also created a step-by-step guide for volunteers to process such cases within 72 hours. Mrs. Patterson approved it immediately. Mrs. Morrison received her additional stamps in 2 days. Upon returning to thank the board, Mrs. Patterson directed her to Helene. "Thank Miss Richter, she's the one who helped you." Mrs. Morrison, seeing Helene's POW uniform, hesitantly asked, You're German?" Helene braced for anger, but Morrison instead embraced her, weeping. Thank you for saving my baby." Corporal Wilson, guarding the door, turned away. Later, in the jeep, he quietly told Helene, "My sister has a baby. Seeing that mother today, you're a good person, Miss Richter. I don't care what uniform you wore." By March 1945, Helene's simplified exemption protocols were adopted by rationing boards across Iowa. The state rationing administrator visited Des Moines to meet the woman who revolutionized our system, extending his hand in gratitude upon learning she was a German POW. The local newspaper, restricted from naming a POW, ran a story titled "Efficient Administration Improves Ration Board Service," but local officials knew Helene was responsible. Gifts, knitted scarves, homemade preserves, a blank journal, began arriving at Fort Des Moines, addressed to the German woman at the rationing board, necessitating a storage area for Major Thompson. Evenings at the camp also transformed. German language instruction for American staff evolved into genuine cultural exchange. Helene taught German to 15 Americans 3 nights a week, including officers, enlisted men, and occasionally Colonel Harrison. The learning was mutual. Sergeant Frank Kowalski, of Polish descent, taught Helene American idioms, explaining English's embrace of absurdity. Sarah and Margaret included Helene in their weekly letter-writing circle, helping her write to the Red Cross to find her family. They shared photos: Sarah's fiancé in France, Margaret's brother in the Pacific, and Helene's sister and children, last seen in Hamburg in 1943. They found common ground in their fears and helplessness against the global war. Mrs. Patterson began inviting Helene to lunch during rationing board days, always with Corporal Wilson present and within regulations, but these interactions became increasingly personal. They discussed books, Mrs. Patterson enjoying Dickens and Helene, the new American author Steinbeck. They spoke of their families. Mrs. Patterson's husband, a school teacher killed at Pearl Harbor, Helene's father, likely dead in the Hamburg firestorms, who taught her about organization. One Thursday in March, Mrs. Patterson gave Helene a framed photograph of her wedding day in 1903. "I want you to have this," she said, "as a reminder that the best of us, American, German, anyone, we all love the same way, lose the same way, grieve the same way. This war has taken people I loved, but it's also brought me you. That's complicated, and I don't understand it, but it's true." Helene, tears streaming, said, "I don't deserve your kindness." Mrs. Patterson gripped her hand. "Kindness isn't about deserving, dear. It's about recognizing humanity when we see it." Other German POWs at Fort Des Moines noticed Helene's transformation, the American respect she received, her meaningful work, and the friendships she formed across enemy lines. Greta Hoffmann, a 31-year-old former Wehrmacht radio operator, approached Helene about administrative work. Major Thompson authorized Greta to assist with personnel file updates, and her precision improved record-keeping accuracy by 18% within weeks. Margot Steinberg, 24, a chemist with pharmaceutical supply experience, hesitantly offered her expertise in textile preservation to combat humidity damage in quartermaster stores. Helene arranged a meeting, and Margot's knowledge saved $15,000 in textile supplies within 2 months. The camp was changing. The German POWs were becoming valuable contributors, their skills recognized beyond their nationality. Colonel Harrison observed this with interest. At a March staff meeting, he highlighted Fort Des Moines' leading German POW labor productivity and lowest disciplinary incident rates in the 7th Service Command. "Miss Richter and her colleagues have demonstrated something important," he told his officers. Former enemies can become productive community members when treated with dignity and given meaningful purpose. This isn't just humanitarian, it's practical. Every German POW contributing skills is one less administrative burden and one more solved problem. He concluded, it's also good preparation for whatever peace looks like. These women will return to Germany eventually, if they return believing Americans are fair and humane, that serves our long-term interests better than barbed wire and suspicion. However, late at night, alone in her bunk, Helene wrestled with the crushing weight of this complexity. Letters from the Red Cross brought devastating news. Hamburg was rubble, her family's shipping business destroyed, and her father confirmed dead in the July 1943 firestorms. Her sister and children were missing, likely dead. The Germany she knew was ash. Yet here in Iowa, she had purpose, friends, and respect. Americans trusted her. Her work mattered. Mrs. Patterson, who lost her husband at Pearl Harbor, called her dear. Sarah and Margaret taught her American songs and laughed at her accent. Corporal Wilson told her she was a good person. She felt a belonging here she couldn't possibly find in shattered Hamburg. The guilt was immense. Safe, well-fed, and valued, while German civilians starved. What right did she have to friendship with the enemy, or satisfaction from helping Americans while Germans suffered? Then she remembered Mrs. Morrison's baby, saved by the formula stamps expedited by Helene's system. She remembered the 300 Iowa families whose exemption petitions she'd processed, putting food on their tables. She recalled Major Thompson's genuine respect, Mrs. Patterson's authentic friendship, and Sarah's unspoken understanding in bringing her coffee just as she liked it. This humanity was real, and it terrified her. She knew with certainty that when repatriation orders came, the choice between returning to ashes and staying with former enemies who had become friends would tear her apart. The war was ending. Germany was collapsing. Soon, she would face an unanswerable question. Where was home now? March 1947, Fort Des Moines, Iowa. Helene Richter, 28, left the camp with a single suitcase and Major Thompson's sponsorship letter, its contents, immigration papers, a character reference, and a job offer from a Chicago law firm, feeling weightier than her luggage. The barracks, where she'd shed her belief in poisoned American eggs, now stood empty. Most German POWs repatriated. Ahead lay a future in the nation she'd been conditioned to hate. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, who'd introduced Helene to mess hall procedures 2 years prior, drove her to the 2 p.m. train to Chicago. "You're more organized than half our officers," Morrison assured her at the platform. Their brief, awkward embrace symbolized a transition from enemy to friend, and for Helene, a future American. Aboard the train, Helene carried Morrison's sister's Chicago address as a safeguard. As the Iowa countryside passed, her thoughts drifted to Hamburg, 70% destroyed according to her brother's last letter. Her mother endured in a cellar, subsisting on British rations, their family shipping business, established in 1887, reduced to rubble. Helene had inquired about returning, but her mother's January reply, scrawled on a flour sack, urged, "Stay in America. Nothing here but hunger and memories. Build a life where there is hope." In Chicago, March 1947, Helene began work at Henderson, Marcus and Associates on the 12th floor of the Board of Trade building. Her English, perfected over 2 years at Fort Des Moines, was flawless. Managing partner Robert Henderson, impressed by Major Thompson's reference regarding her POW. The administrative reorganization challenged her to tame the firm's chaotic filing system. Within 3 months, Helene implemented her color-coded system from Iowa, red for urgent, blue for ongoing, green for archived. This system, originally tracking 847 German POWs, now managed 2,300 legal clients. By 1949, the firm occupied 3 floors, with Helene supervising 12 American secretaries who initially eyed the German immigrants suspiciously. Her competence soon won them over. She never revealed her POW past, simply stating she'd held administrative positions in Iowa when asked about her war years, a technically true but incomplete account. The full truth, including her former belief in propaganda, the terror of her first American meal, and the shame of her past misjudgments, remained guarded. Letters from Iowa became a monthly ritual. Major Thompson corresponded until his death in 1979, 32 years of reflections on his family, retirement, and praise for Helene as the most efficient administrator I ever commanded. Dr. Elizabeth Vance, the camp physician who'd initially examined Helene for malnutrition, sent Christmas cards until 1998. Lieutenant Morrison's quarterly letters detailed her nursing career in Minneapolis. These cross-enemy friendships sustained Helene through her challenging early immigrant years. In 1952, she became a naturalized American citizen, swearing allegiance alongside 17 other immigrants in a Chicago federal court. The judge, upon learning her unique background, offered a personal welcome home, prompting Helene's tears as she recognized home as a choice, not just a birthplace. She never returned to Germany. Though her mother passed in Hamburg in 1954, Helene mourned alone in Chicago, remembering the woman who had urged her toward hope over ruins. Her brother immigrated to Argentina in 1956, and the Richter family, their Hamburg roots severed by war and necessity, scattered across 3 continents. By 1960, Helene managed Midwest Import-Export Corporation, a transatlantic trade firm. The irony was not lost on her. A woman from a ruined German shipping family now facilitated American-European commerce. Her efficient systems managed 40 employees. Company president James Walsh credited her with a 30% growth rate. In 1965, Walsh, reviewing her organizational charts, asked about the origin of her skills. Helene, for the first time in 18 years, honestly replied, "Mind a prisoner of war camp in Iowa." Walsh stared as Helene recounted her experience at Fort Des Moines, the administrative chaos, her solution, and Major Thompson's trust. After a long silence, Walsh deemed it extraordinary and suggested she document it. Unsettled, Helene declined, questioning who would believe such humane treatment of a German POW, or care about her small contribution to American military efficiency while German cities burned. She retreated to her meticulously organized files and quiet American life, built on foundations few understood. The silence endured for 35 years. Helene retired in 1982 at 63, her personnel file praising her exemplary service and innovative administrative methodologies. She lived alone in a North Side Chicago apartment, corresponding with her dwindling Fort Des Moines connections. Major Thompson died in 1979, Dr. Vance in 1998, and Lieutenant Morrison in 2001, each death severing another link to her past. In 1995, her nephew Carl, visiting from Argentina, discovered boxes of her carefully preserved, chronologically organized letters. Reading Major Thompson's 1947 sponsorship letter, Carl, stunned, asked his 76-year-old aunt, "You were a prisoner of war?" This question shattered 48 years of silence. Helene recounted everything: the propaganda, the poisoned eggs, the terror, the kindness, and her choice to stay. Carl, a journalist, insisted on documenting this important story. Helene dismissed it as nothing special, but Carl persisted, publishing From Enemy to Citizen, a POW's Journey, in a German-American cultural magazine in 1997. The article elicited an overwhelming response: letters from other German POWs, children of Allied soldiers, and historians. The Fort Des Moines Museum, established in 1986, requested an interview. In October 1998, at 79, Helene returned to Fort Des Moines for the museum's oral history project. The preserved barracks, now exhibition space, brought her back to the room where she'd first tasted the supposedly poisoned eggs, where Lieutenant Morrison had patiently explained American breakfast. Museum director Patricia Chen recorded 4 hours of Helene's testimony. Helene detailed the propaganda, the suspicious American portions after German starvation rations, the moment she realized the food was safe, her administrative solutions, Major Thompson's trust, and her decision to stay. When Chen asked why she'd remained silent, Helene precisely answered, "Because I ate 3 meals a day in Iowa while Hamburg starved, because I was treated with humanity while German cities burned, because I helped the enemy while my brother died fighting them, because I chose America over Germany." How do you explain that without sounding like a traitor to one side or ungrateful to the other? So I said nothing. I worked, I lived, I became American quietly. This interview became the centerpiece of the museum's POW exhibition, opened in 2000. Helene, the last surviving German POW from Fort Des Moines able to testify, attended the dedication. Helene Richter passed away on January 15, 2005, at 87, in Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Chicago, due to pneumonia. Her nephew Carl and 3 former Midwest import-export colleagues were present. Childless, though she had dedicated her life to work and the quiet preservation of wartime friendships. She was buried in Chicago's Graceland Cemetery, Section 14, Lot 87, her tombstone simply reading, Helene Richter, 1918 to 2005, German, American, friend. Her meticulously managed estate included her letters, carefully preserved in archival folders, color-coded by correspondent, red for Major Thompson, 237 letters, blue for Dr. Vance, 189 letters, and green for Lieutenant Morrison, 156 letters. Her POW camp system even organized her most treasured possessions. Carl donated these to the Fort Des Moines Museum and the U.S. Army Women's Museum, perfectly catalogued and indexed for researchers. Her final gift, efficiency. Helene Richter's legacy lives in archives and systems, not monuments. The Fort Des Moines Museum's 2006 permanent exhibit, Helene Richter, From Prisoner to Citizen, showcases her letters, immigration papers, career photos, and her original 1945 color-coded filing system. Annually, over 15,000 visitors learn her story. A Nazi Party membership card, 1943, marked void by Helene May 1945, placed beside her 1952 naturalization certificate, highlights her bureaucratic transformation. Midwest Import-Export Corporation, though acquired in 1998, still uses modified versions of her organizational systems, their origin unknown to current employees, but their efficiency, like color-coded files and chronological archiving, enduring. A 2008 University of Iowa dissertation, Administrative Contributions of German POWs in American Camps, 1943 to 1946, featured Helene Richter, Dr. Michael Brennan, noting her systems saved the U.S. Army an estimated 2,400 administrative hours at Fort Des Moines alone, subsequently influencing other camps, a substantial yet unheralded impact. Helene's humanitarian legacy is more complex. Her story, though not unique among thousands of humanely treated POWs, is significant because she documented it. Her letters offer rare insight into the psychological impact of unexpected kindness, the confusion of propaganda meeting reality, and the choice between homeland and hope. Scholars studying post-war German-American relations cite her correspondence as proof that reconciliation sprang from individual human connections, not just treaties. Major Thompson's trust, Helene's decision to stay, and their 32-year friendship exemplify how small acts of humanity across enemy lines forge bonds stronger than national hatred. Her narrative teaches that propaganda crumbles against consistent counter-evidence, the possibility of change. Helene Richter arrived believing in American torture and poisoned food, her Nazi education absolute truth. She left an American, having learned that enemies could be friends, competence transcends nationality, and humanity survives even total war. Her documented transformation holds modern relevance, reminding us that in polarized times, dignity, not cruelty, can change people. The Fort Des Moines Museum uses her story to educate high school students that dehumanization is learned and can be unlearned through direct human contact. Helene Richter's ultimate legacy is proof. A German woman raised on Nazi propaganda could become a proud American through simple, consistent kindness. Administrative competence could bridge enemy lines. Friendships could endure the war that forged them. Choosing hope over hatred, even at the cost of abandoning one's homeland, was not betrayal but survival. Her color-coded filing system, still an emblem of efficiency 6 decades after her death, stands as a testament to a truth greater than war. Human potential, recognized regardless of nationality, creates value that outlasts conflict. She anticipated execution, but received clean sheets, safe food, and trust. From this unexpected foundation of humanity, she built an American life, proving that competence, dignity, and kindness are not wartime weaknesses, but enduring strengths for peace. Helene Richter's story matters because it demonstrates that even in humanity's darkest hour, when total war sought to reduce people to enemies, individual acts of decency created futures hatred could never achieve. Her quiet, efficient Chicago life, born of trust forged in a POW camp, proved that humanity across war lines not only survives, it builds new worlds.